Hello, eighth graders. It's been a while since I've gotten to see you, so it is good to at least talk to you. I should be back by the end of this week, so hopefully we'll be finishing up this task that we're giving you today, and we can get started on our next unit. I'm working through your memoirs right now, and so I'm hoping to have grades updated here before school today. So hopefully by now you've gone to the library and you started this video and you're being wonderful for Mr. Chris this week. I know that I'm sure you are. And so today our big focus is going to be wrapping up our memoir unit. So we're going to look at a plan for like drawing all of our ideas together and how we could curate a potential holding place for all of our memoir ideas. Or if we were to actually write them out, all of our memoir stories. And so I know some of you are working on something kind of like this already. So that's going to fit perfectly. So your final task today is you are going to curate the book and cover and the beginnings of a book of memoirs. And so we have lots of examples for you. Like we've looked at Amy Rosenthal's Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life. I know that we haven't read it together, but it's in your packet, Persepolis, which we're going to look at today. And then we also have Jerry Spinelli's Knots in My Yo-Yo String. And so we haven't used this one, but these are all memoirs written by individuals. And so we're going to use these as our anchor text today to show what the actual physical holding place for memoirs can look like. And so that is what we are going to do. So if we skip ahead to the next slide, this is what your task is going to be made up of. So you have 5 different things that you want to accomplish over the course of the next basically the rest of the week, the next few days. So you want to decide on a title of your memoir. So you've written 2 memoirs, right? And so you don't have to write any additional memoirs. This is just if you were going to compile additional stories that would fit within kind of a memoir, just like Amy Rosenthal. She has countless in here, right? Ones for every letter of the alphabet. And so you don't have to write all of these, but if you were going to write, let's say 5 memoirs, which we'll get to that in a second, what would the cover of your story look like? What would the title of your memoir be? Hers is Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life, right? She talks about how she has not survived all odds. I have not lived to tell. I have not witnessed the extraordinary. This is my story, right? This is the cover of her book. You'll notice that she's used blue and kind of a lime green. There's a picture of an umbrella, right? These are all decisions that she made purposefully. And so you can think about like, what would you want your cover to look like? And then you get to design it. I recommend using Google Drawing, or you could do it by hand. If you're someone who's extremely well-versed in art, or even if you're not, and you wanted to give it a shot, go ahead. But you need to have a title to what your memoir would be. And not just the title of one specific small piece, like a chapter, but what would you call the whole story, right? The whole basically compilation of stories. And you could, like I said, you could use Google Drawing and draw it by hand, or if there's another program that you all are oftentimes better than us teachers at finding ways to create covers or designs or whatever it is. So if there's another program, let me know and you're welcome to use it. The next thing that you would need to include would be a foreword or an introduction, right? It provides background information for the reader about you, the author, and gives context for the content in your memoir. And it also serves as a way to show the purpose of your writing. We're going to show some examples in a second. But so you want to have some kind of introduction that basically pieces together and talks about maybe why are you writing this memoir? Not just because your teacher asked you to, but why are all these stories important to tell? You also want to have a dedication or acknowledgments. This is where you dedicate the book to someone or different individuals, or it's where you acknowledge those who helped you along the way. A table of contents. Now, this part is important in the sense that you are not writing any additional memoirs. You do not have to write additional memoirs. I want to make sure that's very clear. But we want you to have at least 5 chapters. So you've written 2 memoirs, right? So if you were to create a table of contents, we want to see at least 5 chapters. All you would have to do is come up with the ideas. And you've done that. They should be in your notebook. So what are 3 additional stories? Or if you're like, you know what, I don't love one of my memoirs, it doesn't really fit with kind of what I want to do for my book, that's okay. Then you would just basically create a table of contents. You're not actually creating the book. You're just doing these 5 different steps to create a book. And then if you wanted to, you eventually could, but by no means do you absolutely have to. And so you should be able to title each one and explain the connections to one another. And you've already done 2 chapters, right? And then the last thing would be a summary, and that kind of that's the thing that goes on the back of the book. So how would you summarize kind of what your story's about? I'm going to come back to this, but I've linked a Memoir final task planning document in Google Classroom for you. You could be using that. You don't have to. It's just a spot for you to kind of house all of your ideas as you move forward. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the examples. So here's just the covers of the 3 examples that we've talked about already. So if you can look, like Knots in My Yo-Yo String is by Jerry Spinelli, and he has included a picture of himself as a child. I'm looking at this one right here. And a yo-yo, a part of a yo-yo, and then the knots in his yo-yo string, right? If you are someone who has ever used a yo-yo, a knot in your yo-yo string is devastating because, right, it makes it so you can no longer utilize it, right? And so it's probably just, so to me, like the title of his novel is about like kind of all the slip-ups or all the different obstacles in his life as he was growing up, right? So all the little knots that he had to overcome. Persepolis is the story of the story of childhood, and it's one of those things where it's this woman who grew up in Iran, and so it's all about her kind of like trying to survive the Islamic Revolution. And so she writes a really beautiful introduction to kind of give some context, because if you're like me, I don't know a ton about the Iran or the Islamic Revolution. And so I needed to build some background knowledge, and that's something that she provides for us right here in the beginning. And then we've already talked about Encyclopedia of Ordinary Life. These are all covers. If you can see, they're all very different. And there's the author made those decisions, right? They're all different colors. And so you can play around with color. You can play around with title. Make sure that you've included your name. Some of them have, if you look, the placement of like their name, the author's name is like at the top or the bottom. Sometimes the title takes up most of the like jacket, if you will, like Knots in My Yo-Yo String, or it's smaller. And Persepolis has kind of like a little byline as well, or a second line of like the story of a childhood. Same thing with Knots in My Yo-Yo String, the autobiography of a kid. And then Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life kind of has like those couple sentences where she talks about how she did not live to tell. And so these are just examples of like how you could design a cover. The next thing that I want to talk about is introductions and summary. We already talked a little bit about the introduction for Persepolis. You can see there in the example, but here it talks about like the Elam nation. So in the 2nd millennium BC, while the Elam nation was developing a civilization along Babylon, Indo-European invaders gave their name to the immense Iranian plateau where they settled. The word Iran was derived from Ariana Viejo, which means the origin of the Aryans. And so it goes on to give you this background information. If you have some stories in your, you can hear Thor in the background. If you have some stories that maybe you need to give some background information, you could potentially add an introduction like this, or it could just be really short. You could think about the foreword. Thor, please stop. You could think about the foreword in Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life and how it's really short, right? She just talks about how like, right, how she's very ordinary. That's the title of her story. And so she goes on to say like, I'm not a misunderstood genius. I'm not a former child celebrity. I'm not an addict. I do not have a past life. I have not survived against all odds. So hers is really humorous and funny, and it's really short, right? You can see that it's not very long there compared to the introduction. And so it could be something that's really short. Same thing for the summary, right? It normally goes either on the back of the book or on the inside jacket. And it's just a quick like, hey, this is about Amy Rosenthal, right? This is about Jen Decker. And you could talk about how like, these are some of the stories that are going to be in these are some of the stories that are going to be in the book, right? It doesn't have to be super long summary. It could be relatively short. I challenge you to maybe look at some of the books we have in our classroom or the book that you have. Even if it's a narrative, you could still get an idea of like how you would want to like design or lay something out. The next thing we can talk about is table of contents. So in Not So My Yo-Yo String, he lays out all of the different chapters, right? And their titles. That's what you would do. So for the table of contents, where you are adding at least 3 additional stories, you could do more than that. You want to put their titles. You could also put like a little short excerpt underneath each one and talk about how it connects. You don't have to worry about doing that today. We'll talk a little bit more about that Wednesday and Thursday. But basically, like, you just have to list the different books or the different chapters that you would include. And that would just be the title of the smaller vignettes or the smaller memoirs that you've already written, plus 3 additional ones. Or again, if you wanted to just say, you know what, I want to scrap those as far as I have a better idea for what I want my memoir book to look like, and I would write these stories instead, you could do that. That's totally fine. I would challenge you to do more than 5, but 5 is what we're requiring. And then lastly, the dedication and acknowledgments, right? This is just like who you want to thank or who the book is dedicated to. And sometimes people write long like entries and they talk about how thankful they are for someone who helped them or whatever it might be. Or sometimes it's a list and it's really short. So just make sure that you're also including that. I want to go back to the planning document really quick. Like I said, this is linked to Google Classroom for you. And so this would be what you could utilize. So what I would challenge you to do is after you've watched this video, and you can talk to Mr. Chris if you have any questions, because I've also sent him this video and this planning doc. And basically you want to use this to start planning. If you want to look at some examples, I challenge you to like, in the example column, jot down some of the ideas that you liked or that you want to mimic, right? We've said so many times you can mimic great writers. That's absolutely okay. And so you could put down in the example spot, like, what are the examples you looked at and what did you like about them? And then in the last column, that plan place or that plan spot, you can put kind of like what your plan is, or like what are maybe how are you going to start your dedication or acknowledgments, or like what is your introduction going to say? You can use this and eventually you can copy it over into your final draft. But this is for you to utilize and kind of have a compare and contrast of the examples that you liked and that you saw. So that is really all I have for you today. You have the entire rest of the time to begin work on this. Today is just your initial day, and so you should begin working. Like I said, don't be afraid to email me or ask Mr. Chris questions. Mr. Dickinson, I think, is also out today, but Ms. Tresick is here. And so if you were like, oh my gosh, I just really need to talk to a language arts teacher and in person, ask Mr. Chris and see if you can chat with Ms. Tresick. Especially, I know 5-6, she has her online section, but she might be able to help you during her during 1, 2, 5, 6, or 7, 8. So I hope you'll have a wonderful day. I will see you at the end of this week, and good luck with your memoir book.